Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where today is another sort of curated conversation where I want to talk about Squid Game. And by the way, I suppose if you're a random person who came and found this video through googling Animal Crossing Squid Game, this is not really like me recreating Squid Game in Animal Crossing or anything like that. This is just me in my daily Animal Crossing video diary, and I just happen to be talking about Squid Game, which is why the title is titled as such. So you might want to go elsewhere for your Squid Game recreations, because that's happened with things I've talked about before. people search it up trying to find like its relevant thing in Animal Crossing, and I suppose they end up being disappointed to find out it's just me talking about the topic for about half an hour. But anyway, hello there everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 4:18 p.m. on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021. Dear Leif is here today. Something. Also, Squid, I suppose another forewarning, Squid Game is probably, I don't actually know if it's 18. I assume it is rated 18 by the survey. Hold on. Excuse me to have a bit of a cough. Is it what's its rating? It must be rated like at 18 or adult or something. Either way, don't watch it unless you like can. it's quite a gruesome thing, but I'm not going to be, of course, going into any sort of gory details or anything like that. I don't intend to. I'm just going to sort of talk about things in broad strokes. Anyway, I completely forgot we helped Gulliver yesterday. Apparently we bought something from Red. Raymond gave us to my new pal Fabu. Not really new, but we've had this letter quite a few times before. We know Leif is our visitor, who unfortunately is not someone we really pay much attention to. Sorry, Leif. So we're just going to go about our usual business of doing Nook Now mission farming. So yeah, Squid Game. I know I'm extraordinarily late to the party on this one. If you don't, like, I'm pretty sure everyone else has probably watched Squid Game at this point, and I've only recently finished watching it with a group of friends. What did I think of it on the whole? Loved it. Oh, I'll also warn you before I start talking about spoilers. I suppose if you're worried about that and you haven't seen it yet entirely. I thought it was really great. I haven't seen much Korean media, I'll be honest. I've seen Parasite and I've seen Squid Game. I think might be the only two, because I'm not really into K-dramas, like a huge like dramatic aspect of shows. I like it doesn't really appeal to me as much as it appeals to other people, which hence I don't tend to seek it out. Korea does have animated stuff, but I'm not particularly well versed of it, so I suppose that's probably why I don't really watch many Korean or consume much Korean media. The only thing I do is I listen to K-pop sometimes, but even then I'm like, it only really stops at the songs, and I don't really know much else any further than that, like in the personalities or the actual fandom aspect of it. But I gotta say, you know, Parasite and Squid Game, both sort of like 10 out of 10 watches so far. Well, maybe not exactly 10 out of 10, but on the scale of do I enjoy it or did I not enjoy it or did I find it okay, I enjoyed it thoroughly quite a lot. And Squid Game, if you don't know, it's a rather brutal murder game, I suppose, is how you put it, like where 456 competitors who are all very poor and who or basically need for a huge amount of money are put into like sort of like battle royale, Hunger Games-esque death games where they play children's games, and if where you lose, you die. Oh, we got a special island. We got the Mushroom Island, which we don't particularly need, but we will dig up any potential elegant and those rarer mushrooms. That's a gyroid, but still, we'll dig up any of the rarer mushrooms because we never have too a few of those. Yeah, and it follows quite a few characters. You know, the main character being Geehan, I believe his name is, who is sort of just like your, like it. I was gonna say like lovable protagonist. He's not really lovable in the sense, but he's much more like an idealistic sort of protagonist vibes of like, you know, I would say he's kind of got his heart in the right place, but you know, due to circumstances, partially by him and partially out of his own control, I suppose he's fallen on tough times and has not exactly turned him into the best person. He's a flawed person, I suppose, is perhaps the best way to put it, with idealistic beliefs in a certain degree. And it follows him essentially as the main character with a load of other side characters that we'll get into in a bit, and their sort of situation through these death games. And honestly, you might be like, what are death games? Well, you know, if you lose, you die. So you can kind of see the writings on the wall to begin with. When you watch your show, you can kind of predict story beats to happen. You have like an overarching idea, and now we're starting to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, stop watching and go watch Squid Game yourself. In my opinion, a Squid Game isn't particularly much of like a subversive game with how it plays around with tropes as much. Like, not in the sense that Arcane, which I think does an incredible job at playing around with tropes and expectations quite a lot, but does it in a way that's very like readable, so it doesn't really feel like much as subversion. I feel like I'm trying to think if there's any like big subversion. The biggest subversion game is obviously Player One, being like the sort of mastermind behind it all. That's a very big spoiler, so apologies if you haven't backed out already. I think it's the only big spoiler. The other things you can sort of see coming eventually, but you don't know exactly how they happen. And to be honest, I think that's the important part. Like, you know, the overarching ideas of what's going to happen. You know, your main protagonist is probably going to win the game somehow, and everyone else is going to die. It's a death games after all, and the ways they die, you don't know how it's going to happen, but you assume it's going to be quite brutal. And it's going to pull at the heartstrings in some way or another. And it does do that, but even knowing those sort of broad strokes, I don't think really ruins much of the games for you. And honestly, you know, the more I think about it, the less, the big plot twist of quote number one being behind games, I'm not going to say like, it doesn't feel like on that, but for me personally, it didn't sit with me as like a, whoa, this is a huge mind-blowing sort of moment. To me, it sort of just ended up being like a, oh, okay, sort of situation. And I can't quite sort of like reconcile my mind of why that feels the case. Perhaps it's because I feel, maybe I think the answer is I kind of don't care as much as perhaps the show kind of expects me to. I suppose it does paint the new that character, what's his name, like Owell Nam, I think, in a new light, where you now have a lot more sort of like resentment, I suppose, for him. Or at least me personally, I'm just like, oh, he's actually like a horrible person rather than being sort of like a lovable old grandpa kind of character. You now be like, oh, he's actually like incredibly cruel and villainous, I suppose. I'm not going to say it's like a 180 on his character necessarily, because he's acting, I suppose, the whole time, or feigning ignorance. And really his whole motivations of being like bored, I suppose, in the first place, to even turn to these sort of situations. I'm not going to say it like leads him credence or anything, but it's more like I'm not going to say it's not out of character or anything. It's just like the big reveal, I don't know. It didn't like upset me, or it didn't like shock me. Not like it didn't shock me. I was surprised, don't get me wrong, but it didn't like, I feel like it didn't have an impact on me, and I'm not really sure why. And I've been trying to contemplate over that sort of thing. But Squid Game on the whole, I don't think really had many like big shocking like subversions of expectations, but it did have shocking moments. Of course, the one which I'm sure people would always refer to, episode 6, being where the death of the supposed death of Owell Nam, the death of Ali, and the death of I forgot her name, like Hyejin or something like that. The girl who had like an abusive father essentially, and was the friend to Saibyok for the Marbles game. But the whole Marbles game episode is by far and away probably one of my most favourite episodes of any TV series ever, I would say, but also certainly my favourite of games. And I feel like that's what one of the things that Squid Games does really well is, of course, like building up a cast of characters and getting you invested in them, even though you know they're going to die, which is the whole point, which is why I say there's not actually much subversion, I feel like, in the first place of Squid Game. You know going into it what it is like, okay, maybe not in episode 1 if you've never heard of it before, but for all the promotions and stuff for it in the first place, you know it's a Death Games to begin with. You know there's something suspicious going on. So it's no surprise that people end up dying, I suppose, immediately in the first game, I feel like. And after you watch that and you understand it's the concept of the first Death Game, you're like, oh, everyone is going to die except for one person, probably. At least that's the expectation I got into it. Perhaps that's me sort of being like built up from things like previous battle royales, or like a Hunger Games, where you know you can't have multiple winners, and except for that one like case in Hunger Games where I guess for 2 cases they talk about in Hunger Games, which are the basis of a book, but that's not really the point. It's sort of just like you kind of know it's going to happen. You just are sort of secretly hoping it's going to be your character, your favourite character who survives, even though you kind of know internally it's probably not. And it's going to be heart-wrenching when it happens. And that's, like, you know, I suppose mark of a good TV series or any good sort of movie. We're going to do the group sketching because you can actually get rewards for it if you do it 50 times in a row. So we might just sort of sit here, and I'll do my best to follow along with stretching, but don't put too much credence into it. We're going to do buttons. But yeah, but it's always a mark of, I suppose, a good show where it can get you rather invested into the characters, even though you know they're going to die or whatever. Even though you know they're going to die, you still get invested in the end. So I've sort of just been going around in circles, I suppose, of what I'm saying. And it is heart-wrenching when it happens, to be honest. Like, I think what probably the most heart-wrenching one. Ali is heart-wrenching, and obviously painted what's his name? I can't remember the smart guy's name who everyone hates now because he killed Ali. Sujin? That doesn't sound right. Sungwoo. That sounds right. so someone like Sungwoo. You know what? I should just get up like a Squid Game Wikipedia page because then. No, don't play Squid Game for free. What are you talking about? What's his name? Sungwoo. That's it. Everyone hates him or something, but you know, of course, I'm not sure I hate him necessarily as much as viscerally as everyone else thinks, because everyone thinks he's an a-hole, which is, you know, fair. But also he's put into like a life and death situation where he just has, I suppose, a different personality in the end, where his is one where he's willing to sacrifice, I suppose, anything and everything, because, you know, people, I suppose it is very brutal what he does, but you know, I'm not gonna lie and be like, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people in that same sort of situation, given the same sort of opportunity, would do the same thing. I suppose what I mean by that is it's easy to be like take the high ground morality wise when you're not in that sort of life and death situation, when not even just life and death, you in Sangwoo's case, he thinks his mother's livelihood is now going to be fully impacted forever because of his own actions. And of course, I also think it's easier from a perspective to be like, oh, these people shouldn't be in this situation in the first place, and thus lack sympathy for the characters. I don't know, I feel like it's a bit mean-spirited to go through that route, but I also understand the situation, and I also understand that perspective, I suppose is what I want to say. We're going to customise being some plant flowers. Have I even said anything on merit yet? I don't really know. I don't know where I was going with this, to be perfectly honest, so I guess I'll just go into the next topic. Obviously, Squid Game is meant to be a social commentary about class divide and that sort of thing, about, you know, it's very similar things of all these sort of battle royales, rich people taking delight at the expense of poor people in these sort of like games for entertainment. And I suppose in some aspect we are also kind of like the VIPs watching these poor people get exploited and put together in life and death situations for our own enjoyment, in a certain degree as well. And I feel like it's apparently quite a common thing in Korean media to cover this, because class disparity and wealth disparity in Korean culture is quite big, as I understand it. I'm not going to try and pretend to be an expert on it, because I'm not an expert on it. I don't actually know. I'm not really going to comment on any more on that situation. This is either Amelia's or Vivian's, of course. But it's interesting how often apparently it's covered. So, does it get the point across? Yeah, honestly, I think Squid Game is, you know, quite on the nose about its whole, not teachings, but its own, like, not morals either. Like, its whole message about criticism, I suppose, of the divide and, you know, people being pushed into unfortunate situations, how it's sort of like a crabs in a bucket sort of situation, isn't it? Being made by the rich. Oh, okay. I didn't mean to do that. Being made by the rich, I suppose, to turn against you, the other people, who are, I suppose, in the same sort of situations of them, or for like a sick amusement. Where was I going with any of this? I don't know what to say. My thoughts on Squid Game are a lot more sort of scattered, because I didn't look so much into the meaning message, because I feel like it's a lot more, not ham-fisted necessarily, but I think it's quite like written on the surface, isn't it? It's just more like an entertaining watch. And I feel like I think that Squid Game does incredibly well. This is probably like it's a media. A big part of it is Squid Game does like thriller and suspense incredibly well. That even though you know sort of things which are going to happen in the first place, the way it executes upon them is crazy suspenseful. And I think nothing really exemplifies it more than the Glass Stepping Stones game, which, as I understand it, has garnered a fair bit of criticism for being like quite a strange game in the step up thing, and in the whole scale of things, because one, Stepping Stones is kind of a playground game, but it's also not a very common playground game, and it's also a very strange choice you would have thought was Squid Game, because while the others have been largely skill based or skill influenced, Glass Stepping Stones is the only game I think which is purely chance. Like Red Light Green Light is mostly skill, you would say, but you could say there's a bit of a random element with other people perhaps like knocking you over or forcing you to move, which could make you unlucky, which is, you know, fair. Dalgona game, of course, is the beginning is luck, and then the rest is skill, I suppose. Like, even if you're skilled enough, you can overcome the deficit that being unlucky would be in that game. Tug of War is technically, I guess, is all skill, but it's also like luck, I suppose, forming the teams in the first place. But the glass stepping stones is a sort of weird change of pace where it's all luck. But the thing which makes it my favourite game, as a game, not as an episode, as a game, because by the way, I think an episode is really... Star Wars a really good series because of the VIPs. And we'll get onto VIPs in a second. Because yes, I understand they're meant to be like obnoxious and etc, etc, but I also feel like perhaps better ways to do it in less sort of grating way. Yeah, because Glass Stepping Stones is such an intense game, because I suppose it's the fact that one, we're down to a smaller cast of about 16 characters. Most of them we kind of know. I think you are aware of about like 12 of them essentially, or get introduced to 12 of them throughout the game, and 4 of them are just kind of like nameless characters who die or whatever. But the actual intensity of the entire thing, where every single character, it's basically sort of like a turn-based, every single character has to individually face their own mortality. And because it's luck-based, you know, for basically the first 14 people who are, like, no, first 12 people, and I'm not really sure how the math works out, statistically, they are going to die. And the amount of tension there is on choosing between, what is essentially just a coin toss, a 50-50 chance is honestly so incredibly tense that I can't even properly begin to describe it. Like, how tense I felt in every single moment for every single character as they took a turn at the front of a line and basically took a gamble with their lives 50-50. We don't need to check people's houses, I forgot we got the recipe already. It's incredibly tense, and it goes back into the thing where you know, as you're watching, the first 12 players, they're going to die. Statistically, there's no chance that it's statistically improbable that they're going to make it to the end. You know they're going to die, but even still, like, watching them, you're kind of hoping, I hope that they can make this jump, I hope that they can get through this past step, and maybe there's not necessarily maybe there's a chance that you can live, but even though you know basically they're guaranteed dead, it still somehow feels like there's palpable stakes there. There's something actually being wagered, obviously about life, but I don't know if I'm expressing this properly. There's still tension there, despite the fact you know the outcome already, I suppose is how I put it. Like, the first player, like, coming up to bat, and, like, the tension, I suppose part of it is to do with music and the pacing and the phenomenal acting that goes on throughout most of the Squid game. Cough VIPs. Which, well, actually, the VIP's acting is pretty good. It's just, I think it's more of a writing flaw, if anything. Is incredible. So that's why the Glass Stepping Stones has ended up being my favourite game, because the utter tension in every single step is crazy. I mean, it's also the first one that really sort of made me reflect, not upon death, but upon the brutality, I suppose, of the game himself. Because I feel like, maybe it's just me, but like, you kind of, not you become desensitized to death, but you become desensitized to death in media. And what media is right there, we should give this to her. What I mean by that is, like, especially like in video games, in like and other movies and other TV shows, like, character deaths happen quite frequently. You know, characters pass away, and obviously in real life, it's a devastating thing to happen, especially to someone close to you. But in media, it's not like it's played off just like, for no apparent reason. It's just more like the gravity, I suppose, of a situation, especially for nameless characters, really doesn't hit that hard, in my opinion, at least personally for me. You know, like I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't really think of one, but like a character dying, like in like an action movie or something, you just go like a henchman dying or something from like a evil boss. You just got like, oh, it happens. You know, whatever. You don't really think much about it. You know, it's sort of like a weird what's the word, like, not cognitive bias, some sort of like weird mind effect where you understand that death is a very serious thing, but also when it happens, it feels like it holds no stakes. But I feel like in Squid Game, at least in Glass Stepping Stones, is not the first one, but it's the one where, like, I felt the impact of, I suppose, the death and the brutality of it for every character, including those random strangers. And I suppose part of it is, in fact, where Squid Game probably gets its 18 rating. I don't know if it's actually got an 18 rating, I just kind of assume it does, because it shows quite viscerally what happens to the characters who have fallen through the Glass Stepping Stones and have, unfortunately, died because they fell from like hundreds of meters up in the air. And seeing that there's like a shot of like oh, this is legitimate, right? No, there's no trees. What? How do you have so many fake versions of a birth of Venus? It's incredible, Red. Yeah, I don't know how I can properly explain it, apart from the fact that it sort of like made me more aware of the brutality of a situation rather than me sort of just being like, oh, it's a death. And I think the part that really sort of made it happen was I think it was the fourth person jumping, the fourth and fifth person. It was like after the maths teacher sort of just like sprinted across all the glass things in like a sort of last ditch effort. By the way, epic moment. But the fourth person sort of like turned around to talk to the old lady like behind him, being like, hey, I can't remember which tile that guy jumped on. Was it the left or the right? And then, you know, he's of course, I'm not doing it justice, his delivery is of course very nervous because his life is on the line. And then the lady goes, I think it was the left one. And then he goes, are you sure? Because it's not only your life, my life on the line, it's your life on the line because you're next. And then she goes, yeah, I'm sure. And then obviously she's not sure, but really this guy's just doing a 50-50 guess because he doesn't know in the end, and he just sort of just takes his word, he jumps through, and the glass breaks underneath him and he dies. And you can see the fear in that woman's face where she was like, not only is she now probably guaranteed to die because there's still like 10 50-50 guesses she has to get correctly, she has now sort of like inadvertently killed that guy with his with her lack of memory, because it's understandable exactly, but with her sort of being the deciding factor of which direction he was going to jump in. And then of course her death happens off screen. You only see it through like what it's been reenacted through the VIP section, and then they just show a really gory close-up of like her being dead on the floor. I'm not going to go into any further detail. It's just rather brutal. And at that moment I was like, wow, okay. That entire section just really sort of like, those are the first times I think you're ever introduced to those characters, and then suddenly I'm not like I suppose I am kind of like invested in their deaths now. Like it just like suddenly it clicked in my brain of like, this is messed up. Like obviously it's messed up, but it's just like, I suppose the full scope of the situation sort of landed in my head, where now I sort of not empathize more with the situation, but like I could now put myself in those shoes much more readily and be like, wow, that's utterly terrifying. Which is perhaps why I think last stepping stones is so good. I guess we could talk about, apparently we didn't water these. So let's rebury these and we'll water them. But yeah, there's a lot of good moments throughout Squid Game and all that sort of thing, of like these really tense moments. Despite the fact you kind of know exactly what's going to happen. Like, of course, in red light, green light. Where Ali catches Gi-hun and holds him up by his collar to prevent him from moving while the doll is turned around. Very tense moment. Also kind of ridiculous, I suppose, in an aspect. I don't know if many people would be strong enough to hold up an entire person just by sort of like their neck collar. Dalgona, intense the whole way through. And the deaths are all very brutal because of the constant sort of like gun firing offs which consistently happen. We should replace some of yeah, you know what? We're going to replace this lowly carrot sprout. Oh god. This lowly carrot sprout with a better one. I can't remember. Is this, if it sprouts like this, does it forever sprout with only one? Let's see. No, they look exactly the same. I'm not sure if we need to particularly replace them, but we're at least going to plant this. And plant this just for at least emissions, and then we'll water them. And I suppose at this rate we might as well plant another two, because why not? Yeah, Dalgona very intense. It makes me certainly want to try these death games for myself. Not actually with the threat of death behind them, obviously. I at least, like, part of me is curious. I'm like, I want to see how well I would do at like some of these games. And part of me, part of the very sick and twisted, I suppose, not actually sick and twisted, mind you. Part of me is like, I kind of want to see how well I do in that situation, with including the sort of like threat of imminent death, I suppose, on the line. Even though obviously there's no way you can actually do that without, you know, breaking many laws, and I obviously never want to actually be put in that situation. But part of me is just like, or if you like put my brain through a simulation just to see how well I would do in those situations. I have a morbid curiosity, I suppose, of how well I do. Anyway, Dalgona is very, very cool. I don't really have much to say about Dalgona apart from, I suppose, the tense atmosphere with the constant gunshots going on and everyone sort of like, flinching at every single sound really sort of adds to the tenseness and the atmosphere. Tug of War was pretty intense for just like how loud I suppose it was, how aggressive and how like energy fueled all the movements were. Not, you know, everyone just going rah, rah, rah. And all the panic screams I suppose in the situation. Of course, it's probably the biggest example of, you know what's going to happen because all the main characters are on one team versus a team of where you don't know anyone, and you kind of know exactly what's going to happen story beat wise. You know somehow the main team is going to win, even through a disadvantageous situation, but it's still very intense to watch in the first place. And I suppose there's also a very good moment, I suppose, in the Tug of War where Gihan sort of realises what he's doing, where he's actually just murdering other people, where he has a look at the other people who are struggling against him, and sort of like has that internal realisation as like, hey, these are actually people just like me, you know. I suppose that's also a similar sort of reflection I went through when I watched the Glass Stepping Stones, being like, hey, even though I'm not obviously participating in games or like doing any of this murder business, it's sort of like, hey, these are just like actual people. It's kind of horrifying. Marbles, of course, the games itself aren't actually particularly interesting, I don't think, but it's more like the characters and stories which evolve from it, and the fact that it happens, the fact that it's a brilliant sort of setup into, hey, you know, pair up with, like the last one was a team game, pair up with someone, and then everyone's like, okay, we're going to try and pair up with my friends, we're going to try and pair up and make a strong team, etc, etc. Turns out you're competing against each other. Fantastic subversion, although it is also probably goes into the realm of kind of predictable subversion. To a certain degree, you know some sort of big betrayal is going to happen, some sort of big stinger, and perhaps you don't know exactly sort of ways that it might happen. So when you sort of see the pair up situation, you might start getting a bit of a sneaking suspicion, being like, isn't that a little bit too convenient? Catch fish, catch sea bass. Okay, we'll catch fish and then we'll sell things. But Marble's fantastic story, like it's such good development from. Hold on, what was the character? We have a name up. Han Minyo? No. Han Minyo, very entertaining character, we'll say. No. We want Ji-young, that's it. You meet Ji-young for such a small time and she gets so much sort of like character development and investment. Well, at least I became so invested into her. And then it's sort of like heartbreaking the entire time because, you know, like one of Sae-byuk and one of Ji-young's gonna die. And the same thing with Gihan and Oh-in-am. The old man and the main character, and then I was saying with Sang-woo and Ali. Although, to be fair, a lot of people at that point probably didn't like Sang-woo as much because of his choice to withhold information during the Dalgona game, which almost gets Gihan killed. Which you can read either way. I personally read it as him sort of doing it like a cold calculating way, being like, only one of, like, not all of us can make it out of here alive. I don't want to be one directly responsible for killing, I suppose, a childhood friend, so I'm just going to sort of withhold the information, and if luck has him killed, then luck has him killed, I suppose, in that sort of aspect. But you can also see it in the way that he wasn't entirely sure what was going on with the games and wasn't willing particularly to make a commitment, I suppose, a conviction which he wasn't sure would be correct. Yeah, so Marvel's fantastic game. Fantastic episode game, bit uninteresting. Glass Stepping Stones, fantastic game. Squid Game itself was alright. It was kind of just like them brutally sort of like attacking. It wasn't really much of a Squid Game. It was kind of more like them attacking each other, but of course gives Sang-woo a sort of chance of redemption. And shows how much Gihan has sort of grown as a character to not have his eyes solely focused on the money anymore, nor on revenge. And it shows that he can be not just soft-hearted, I suppose. But we had to race through because there's some other things I want to talk about. VIPs, yeah, they were not great. I feel like they were acted fine. It was just like the writing was really weird. Like, I know they're meant to be just kind of like rich, like out of touch people who just like really crude humor and are meant to be wholly unlikable, but me personally, I suppose I feel like there's better ways necessarily to do that. The writing is just, it didn't come off like it does come off as hateable, but came off as hateable and made me just go what, rather than hateable being like, oh, I just want to detest this character, look at the snobby like so out of touch with reality. It just kind of made me go what the entire time. So it's not great. The whole police subplot kind of, in my opinion, ended up really disappointingly. It was kind of interesting, I think, to see what's his name, Junho, I think. go around vicinity and see things from a different perspective. I don't understand how John Ho lived throughout the entire situation, because every time he came up to a situation, he was just like, yo, what happened? And then everyone else goes, hey, you were there, you should know exactly what's going on. And then apparently, you know, only like a couple of people are suspicious, and as soon as they get suspicious, they die. So that's sort of like a suspend your disbelief. And I suppose apparently it's quite in the Korean style. South Korea kind of quite favour the overly dramatic sort of suspend your disbelief sort of moments. So I can't really fault them for that, because you know, it does allow for like cool story moments. Although you certainly do raise an eyebrow at the situations, being like, it doesn't seem entirely believable at this point. Yeah, in my opinion, the police subplot ended like really anticlimactically. You know, he finds out, oh, whoa. I guess that's meant to be another subversion. It turns out his brother is the person who is like the face of the games, not the face, but you know, what's the word? You know, the chieftain mask dude. And it's just like, whoa. And then the police inspector dies, and that's kind of all you really see of it. It kind of felt like it didn't really go anywhere, and I suppose part of it's sour because of the VIPs being kind of a sour point of the series. But there has been an interesting irony, I suppose, pointed out, where people have put out to the fact that, of course, you know, other cultures represented in Western media are often pretty terrible. So if anything, it's sort of like perhaps it's more of a mockery, I suppose, how other cultures are necessarily presented in Western media, by in this, of course, Eastern media presenting Western media pretty Western characters pretty terribly. Which I think, you know, I choose to buy into that. I choose to believe it was intentional to a certain degree. It's just, you know, personally not quite to my tastes. I didn't really talk about Gangster. I guess a Gangster and the loud woman, they were both kind of interesting characters, I suppose. I'm not really sure if I said much of like merit through this sort of analysis. I feel like I had more to say about Arcane. It's just Squid Game is an entertaining watch, I suppose, you know. I would almost liken it to kind of like an action movie, except for instead of, you know, like if an action movie is like, I made this comparison to Now You See Me. If action movie, it's like what action movie is to like a strength stat is what Now You See Me is to dexterity stat. I suppose Squid Game is to a emotional stat. This doesn't make any sense. It plays with your emotions a lot, is basically, I suppose, the long and short of it as well, of what I'm trying to say. And it's very entertaining to watch. Highly recommend it if it's the sort of thing that you're okay with watching. It is quite brutal, certainly. And episode 6, what was it? Gambu, that's cool. Will forever be in my mind as perhaps one of the greatest episodes I've ever seen in a TV series. Is fantastic. I will say, as a sort of like footnote at the end, I kind of wish I wasn't going to be a season. No, I'm not sure if actually season 2's in the works, but it felt like some threads were left open for potential season 2, which I'm kind of not in favour of, to be honest. I feel like that's it. I feel like the story should just sort of end there. Like, obviously there's more that could be said about the Squid Game, but there's not more I want to know about these characters. I feel like that's it. That's their story. You know, that's kind of where it should be. But we're not going to talk to you, Apollo, in case you want to move. We just sort of like hang around until we see a tank with a thought bubble. Yeah, so I'm not sure how to feel about Squid Game 2, but of course the director's shown his chops. Perhaps he has a good idea for Squid Game Season 2 if it comes out, and we'll have, I'll eat my words, I suppose, and it'll be very entertaining. So yeah, I don't really know if I really said much during this sort of Squid Game thing. It's just, I guess it's kind of cool, to be perfectly honest. Survival, thriller, horror, dramatic, all bunched together. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I don't know, if you watched it and you got your own stuff to say, then do share with me your thoughts. And I will round up this episode here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join my Dear Darling Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.